350 years ago, in this square of Lusk, a declaration was made in favour of joining the revolution going on in Ireland at that time. Lusk, then being in the English Pale, Luke Netterville declared on the royalist side on its behalf. This and other events were to lead to Cromwell's coming to Ireland 8 years later, and the consequences of that occasion are with us to this very day.
I declare on your behalf, for the Catholic army, for God, King and country, to fight for the liberation of Ireland and the freedom of its people from English interference.
Yay!
We demand an end to the confiscation of our lands.
Yay!
And the restoration of the graces.
Yay!
Luke Netterville was there, armed and ready in the square. At Lusk, the crowd heard him say, I declare for the king, even if I must swing from a rope on some other fine day. They marched to Pinocchio and they killed with a will all the Protestant settlers they found.
We are here in a cemetery on a site which was the site of St Mary's Abbey in Drogheda, on the County Dublin part, the southern side of the River Boyne. It was originally an abbey of the Carmelite order, and behind me part of the walls, the old walls of the city of Drogheda, or Treada as it was called in Cromwell's day, where he assaulted the town after originally the day before he had warned them that he was prepared to attack and gave them the option of surrendering, which of course was refused. He assaulted the town with cannon, made a breach in the wall that you see behind me, and massacred the whole garrison, spared none but perhaps 30, which he says in his letter to the Council of the Parliament in England.
Thousands of lives as the cost. In 1649 he attacked on the Boyne, Drogheda and its brave people. He soon breached the walls with fierce cannonballs and set fire to St. Peter's steeple. These are the seeds of the inhuman deeds committed to this very day by orange and green until peace comes between and the weapons are thrown away. And these are the seeds of the inhuman deeds committed to this very day by orange and green until peace comes between and the weapons are thrown.
When Cromwell had defeated the garrison at Drogheda and slaughtered most of them, the survivors and sympathisers he had shipped as slaves to Barbados. Barbados was discovered by British explorers and was uninhabited. They shipped slaves from West Africa to work in the developing sugarcane industry. So many of the inhabitants of that island have Irish ancestors. 40 years after Cromwell's capture of Drogheda, the Battle of the Boyne took place at Old Bridge upriver from the town. It was one of the most important battles of Irish history and known as the Battle of the Two Kings. William's victory is celebrated on the 12th of July each year to this day.
These are the scenes of the inhuman deeds committed this very day by orange and green until peace comes between and the weapons are gone away.
Newgrange, a study in stone, 40,000 tons of stone. That's a sizable lump of Ireland. But how long is it here? Well, if you guessed 5,000 years, you wouldn't be too far out. Before Stonehenge was built in England, before the Greek civilization had settled down, before there was a pyramid in Egypt, we had a thriving old civilization here. The whole area is full of mounds, tombs, most of them. Fornox near the Knoll is a very quiet little place. But look around you and you can see why Celtic forebears chose this as a place. You can see 7 counties from here on a fine day. The sun is always in view from Fornox, and the sun was the important thing as far as the Celts were concerned. This tomb in the Fornox was excavated early this century, and in fact it is the widest single-span tomb in Western Europe. This is a cold and empty place now, but can you imagine the activity here when work was in progress? Most of these elaborate tombs took not months but years to complete. In fact, Newgrange took as much as 40 years and gave employment to hundreds of people. I suppose our government could do worse than commission a few tombs right now. Lusk was a centre, maybe the centre of pagan worship in Fingal for about 1,000 years before Christianity was gradually established. Like now, their priests were the link between the people and the other world. Celts called them Druids. And Druids were fairly bright sparks, and promising chap could spend maybe 20 years preparing for a career in the religious life. At the end of that time, he'd know everything worth knowing about what was essentially a very gentle religion. There was a great belief in the sacredness of stones or anything ancient, like oak trees or whitethorns. And a crowd of children was just the thing to keep away evil spirits, and at certain times of the year, particularly in the late spring, you couldn't walk a mile in this country without bumping into a mob of pure young children horsing around a standing stone or in a sacred grove, and the affair being conducted by a priest or two. This, of course, is to keep the favour of the sun god Lu, and to let the sun shine on their animals and crops for the season. We can never be sure of times or dates before in prehistory, but about 2,000 years ago, when Christ was on earth, such was the fame of Lusk that Cuchulainn the hero was attracted to it to claim his bride Emer. At this time, we are at the stage where legend is beginning to become history, and written records are emerging.
The spot now known as St. Patrick's Island is the first place that he built a church. Patrick, born in Britain of Roman parents, was captured and brought to Ireland and enslaved for 6 years. He escaped later and went to France. He was ordained and sent by Pope Celestine in 432 to Christianise Ireland. The island was very important in early Irish Christian history. It was the site in 1148 of an important synod of the Celtic Church, held to, among other things, fix the date of Easter and other reforms. About 100 years after the synod on the island, the community moved to the mainland at Homepatrick, near today's town of Skerries. Skerries developed in the 18th century and joined with Homepatrick to become the parish of Skerries. At the same time, Rush became a parish in its own right, by breaking away from the then parish of Lusk. The figure of a goat is often used as a symbol of Skerries, and legend has it that the people of that region stole St. Patrick's goat. Skerries is a beautiful and popular seaside resort, still retaining much of its old character in thatched houses and quaint little streets. Its harbour has a long history and now has a flourishing fishing fleet. Much of the catch helps to feed the Dublin population, and prawns are an important export item to France. St. Macklin was a member of a local ruling family ordained by Patrick. He is credited with bringing Christianity to Lusk, and he founded his church on an important pagan site. After Lusk was established, it became the mother church for other sister churches founded from it as far away as the River Delvin. The Gaelic word for a cave is Luska, and legend has it that Macklin either lived in a cave or was buried in one. The Danes first invaded Fingal in 795. This was the start of a long, unsettled and dangerous period in Lusk swords and the surrounding area, until the arrival of Strongbow 375 years later. Lambay had the dubious honour of being the first settlement to be raided and plundered, to be closely followed by Homepatrick and Ireland's Eye. The Danes quickly established themselves in Malahide, from where they fanned out and extended their raiding across Fingal. Lusk and Swords, being the two major ecclesiastical centres in the area, were regularly attacked and plundered. This continued until 854, when an uneasy peace settled over the area. In 897, the native Celts succeeded in driving the Danes back out to sea, and it was 22 years later, in 919, before they recaptured Fingal. Time seems to have taught different lessons to different people. The Danes became relatively peaceful and contented themselves with establishing settlements in the area. Ironically, the Celts had learned the art of war, and it was the men of Meath who now took to burning and plundering Fingal. And it was exactly 1,000 years ago this year, in 993, when the raids recommenced. And in the 170 years from 993 until 1170, records show Lusk and Swords were put to the torch no fewer than 11 times, or once every 15 years. But the legacy remains with us in the names and the descendants. Names such as Seaver and Seagrave, places such as Homepatrick, formerly Inishpatrick, Lambay, Hout, Baldoyle, the town of the Black Strangers, and of course Fingal, which is the territory of the Fair Strangers.
How much is that doggy in the window? The one with the waggly tail. How much is that doggy in the window? I do hope that doggy's for sale. I must take a trip to California and leave my poor sweetheart alone. If he has a dog, he won't be lonesome, and the doggy will have a good home.
When the bodies have crumbled, the old names have scattered. When grass is growing where the rich and powerful held court, a name cut in grey stone can still reach down through the centuries and give a suggestion of the strength attached to the barn walls. Under our noses here in the belfry is the magnificent tomb of Sir Christopher Barnwell and his wife, Marion Charles. Sir Christopher died in 1575, a highly respected man, perhaps one of the most powerful Norman Irishmen. His ancestors had moved from Wales to Ireland in the 13th century, known at that time as de Barnevalds, and they rapidly increased in power and in numbers through staying on the right side in wars and marrying wisely. It's as easy to love a rich girl as a poor one, and Barnwell he is. We had early Barnwells in Parliament, members for County Dublin and County Meath. We had Barnwell High Sheriffs and Justices. Later on, Barnwells led some of the greatest regiments and left their bones on Europe's most famous battlefields. Anyway, the family was almost at its peak when Sir Christopher of Turvey was laid to rest, mourned by his widow Marion and their 20 children. Marion married again, a widower from County Meath, not too far from Trim, a place called Moymet, Mind you, she didn't marry herself beneath herself this time. This man was Sir Lucas Dillon, one of the country's biggest landowners. He was Attorney General and Speaker of the House of Commons under Queen Elizabeth, as well as being Chief Baron of the Exchequer, a man to be reckoned with. It was he who sponsored the mighty tomb of Sir Christopher Barnwell, and when Marion died she was buried at the side of her first husband. Sir Lucas was buried in a matching tomb here with his first wife, Lady Jane Bath. Trim had its own branch of the Barnwell family, of course. It was and still is a town of great power, still full of the remnants of its illustrious past. The castle was the biggest Anglo-Norman fortress in Ireland, containing about 2 acres. And then we had Talbot's Castle, Nangle's Castle, the Yellow Steeple, as well as priories, friaries, abbeys, surely a proper capital of royal Meath. Another major name from Trim is that of Arthur Wellesley, later to become Viscount Wellington of Talvera. Nobody needs to hear anything from me about the famous Duke, but here's one little piece of information. Apparently, when young Arthur was MP for Trim, around 1791 or 2, and before he met his future wife, Kitty Pakenham, he had a little fling with one Jane Barnwell. The inevitable happened, and Jane had a wee daughter. Her parents thought not a lot of Arthur around that stage, and Jane was married off to a decent man, a Mr. Hanlon from County Carlow, complete with daughter, of course. The daughter, Jane, was confirmed at Winchester Convent in 1800, and it is not recorded if Jane Barnwell Hanlon had any more children. Drogheda, heavy with the weight of history. If you want to make an impression down here, don't say you're related to Cromwell. In an honoured place, in this town of spires, in St. Peter's Church in West Street, is the head of the unfortunate St. Oliver Plunkett, Bishop of Armagh. Now, if we go back a wee bit to Dame Marion Dillon, nee Barnwell, nee Charles, you might remember that she gave 20 children to Sir Christopher Barnwell. Well, she gave 3 more to Sir Lucas Dillon, and one of these 3, Thomasina, married yet another strong Norman Irishman, John Plunkett of Lough Crew, County Meath. One of their sons was Oliver. We all know of Oliver's life, how he became Professor of Divinity in Rome, and when persecution of Catholicism became more bearable here in Ireland, he was appointed Archbishop of Armagh. His appalling death is a testimony to the atrocities people commit in the name of religion and power. Oliver Plunkett, the grandson of a Lusk woman, was canonised by Pope Paul VI on the 12th of October 1975.
Off the nose of Lambay Island on the seabed lies the wreck of the John Taylor. This ship was built for the White Star Line to meet the increasing demand of merchant and passenger transport to Australia. This super ship would have been the Titanic of her day, the largest and most advanced built up to that time. The ship, under full sail in a stormy sea and with poor visibility, was driven on the rocks of Lambay Island around midday on the 21st of January 1854. Accounts of the terrible event from some of the survivors make pitiful readings. As people tried to get ashore from the fast sinking ship, the raging sea clawing everything from the rocks, a number of rope lines were established and many people were on the way in when the ship lurched off the rocks. The line snapped and everyone was thrown into the sea. There were 579 people on board, and half of these perished in the disaster. Many people were buried in mass graves on Lamb Bay. Some were buried in Portrand graveyard. The wreck lay on the seabed for over 100 years before serious investigation by divers took place in 1959. The anchor of the ill-fated ship has been erected by the Parks Department of the Dublin County Council in the square of Rush and stands as a memorial to this tragic event. Rush is a famous maritime town, and many of its inhabitants have a long history connected with the sea. It was home to many famous privateers, like Luke Ryan and Jack the Bachelor.
Just over 200 years ago, the quiet estuary of Rogerstown was a busy place. The smuggling trade was at its height. Almost all of the population of the town of Rush and Portrand was connected with smuggling. The goods smuggled in to avoid import duty were brandy, rum, tea, tobacco, laces, and other sundry goods. Some seizures of goods by the revenue officers was very large. On the Beaverstown side in 1780, the revenue officers seized 200 casks of brandy buried in the ground. It took 26 horses and cars to bring the brandy to the King's stores in Dublin City. On another occasion, 111 chests of tea were seized on Lamb Bay. A seizure of run goods, smuggled goods were known as run goods, took place in Portrand. The goods were locked up in a barn. That night up to 500 smugglers attacked the barn to retrieve the goods, but they were beaten off by the revenue officers and the crew of a naval frigate lying offshore. On another occasion, a ship named the Dispatch of Portrand was chased by a naval frigate off the Wicklow coast. The captain and crew of the Dispatch jumped overboard, swam ashore and escaped. The Dispatch was brought to Dublin, where she was found to be laden with run goods: tobacco, tea, rum and brandy. The smuggling of goods by sea was a dangerous trade. The ships loaded the cargoes at Dunkirk in France and had to come down the English Channel and up the Irish Sea, where the British Navy and revenue cutters were always on the lookout for smugglers. In the 1790s, the smuggling trade came to an end. War had broken out between England and France, and the British Navy were on constant patrol in the English Channel for a French invasion fleet, which never came. It was no place for an honest smuggler.
Into the back, lad. In the back, in the back. Quiet, man.
Look, what's that coming? Can you see the lights?
Let's click over. Looks like smugglers.
Smugglers from Rogerstown, right.
Right, let's go.
Halt! Who's going? Run for it! Fire! 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 Halt! Halt!
One little spark of inspiration is at the heart of all creation, right at the start of everything that's new. One little spark lights up for you. Oh, hello there. So glad you could come along. I am the Dream Finder. Musical notes. What delightful melodies those will make. I love these flights of fancy, searching the universe for sounds, colors, ideas, anything that sparks the imagination. A sunbeam. That's a good one. Oh, everything I collect can inspire amazing and marvelous new ideas. And you never know what kind of figment you may come up with. Oh, here's my favorite. 2 tiny wings, eyes big and yellow, horns of a steer, but a lovable fellow. From head to tail, he's royal purple pigment, and there, voila! You've got a figment of imagination.
Dreamfinder, I'm just right.
Not quite.
Huh?
I'll throw in a dash of childish delight. Look, Figment, some new friends have joined us.
Can they imagine too?
Of course! Imagination is something that belongs to all of us.
You mean everyone can think up new things?
That's right, Figment. And every sparkling idea can lead to even more. So many times we're stumbling in the dark, and then, eureka! What a spark!
How are we going to use lightning?
We can combine it with ghostly shivers on a stormy night. And
The labourer works with his hands, the tradesman with his hands and head, the artist with his hands, head and heart. Paul Darcy is an emerging young artist of considerable distinction, whose family moved to Lusk some 10 years ago. A modest young man who recently had a very successful exhibition of his work at the Guinness Hub Store, Dublin. Paul represents some of the latent talent that resides in the Nouveau community. The passage of time shall continue the process of discovery.
wait, first we must store these ideas with the others in the dream port.
Are we almost there?
Oh, the dream port is never far away when you use your imagination.
Come on, everybody.
Around 1835 to 1836, the idea of a railway line from Dublin to Drogheda was first mooted by William Brodigan with the idea of forming a company to build a railway line from Dublin to Drogheda. Two routes were suggested, Dublin to Navan and on to Armagh, and Dublin to Drogheda. The Dublin to Drogheda route was selected. There were a number of alterations to the original plan for the line. An early plan was to bring the railway line out by Dollymount to Malahide, and this plan was objected to by the Dollymount residents. The second plan was just north of Donabate to cross the estuary and go through Canure in Rush and bend back in again.
Sure, each train has its own ID system, right? Or P615 going back, right? Now, I'm after sending a test sound into control. It's worked on computer. And what happens is, as a signal comes through the track, now I put the test sound in, and P165 has come up on the computer, and P615 is the 1305 X Drogheda to Pierce Station. And each train has its own individual ID. So he can actually contact me, he'll press P615 into the computer, and he can phone me up and talk to me.
Work started in 1840 and the line was ready for opening in 1844. Up to 7,000 men were employed on the building of the line. It was a pick and shovel job and the work was very heavy. When the men first came to work, they were too weak for heavy work until they earned some money to buy meat. They afterwards became very good workers. The 15th of March 1844, the Lord Lieutenant and a party of friends made a trip from Dublin to Drogheda. A train of 7 coaches drawn by an engine named Nora Corina, which was gaily decorated with flags. There were 565 persons on board, 200 of which were women. The official opening ceremony of the Dublin-Drogheda Railway took place on the 24th of May 1844, when the Lord Lieutenant laid the foundation stone at Eamon Street Station, Dublin. When the line was first opened, and for some years, there was a station at Baldongan, Featherbed Lane Railway Station. This closed down after a few years. In 1870, the return fare from Rush Lusk Station to Dublin was 1 and 8pence, and that fare remained at that figure for about 60 years.
Christopher Columbus, the very name conjures up an image of the great adventure, 3 tiny ships on a vast ocean. Their last sight of Europe was the ragged coast of County Galway as they left it behind, creating a link between Ireland and the West Indies, which has lasted till the present. The New World, as it was called 500 years ago, was a vastly different place to Europe. Different people, different crops, a whole new culture, which, alas, disappeared under European colonisation.
Sir Walter Raleigh was a great English adventurer in the 17th century. He spent many years in the Barbados, and it was there he saw the potential of the potato, and subsequently experimented with it on his estate at Youghal, County Cork. So what we think of as being as Irish as the shamrock has really only been here for a little more than 300 years. Think of that when you're eating your next bag of chips. On a more serious note, the potato made a huge difference to Irish life. The population exploded as the majority of poor rural families had only to plant a small patch of potatoes in order to feed themselves adequately, where formerly they may have starved. By 1845, the population had exceeded 8 million, nearly all land. In those days, a working man needed a stone of potatoes per day to sustain himself. Therefore, most of the land was planted with potatoes.
In 1845 and 47, the Blight came. In 2 years, 1 million people were dead. By 1850, another 2 million had gone abroad. Like Africa today, they ran away from misery and death. Some of them started new lives and founded rich and influential families, and some of them were never heard of again.
The smell from the ground seeped into their clothes. The potatoes by eve were rotting in rows. Early next morning they walked out the door, the delf on the table, the turf on the floor. Only one thing now left to do, walk away, leave Ireland behind you. Of the roads to the ship, if stones could talk, they'd kneel the fall, unable to walk. Of the roads to the ship, if grass could sing, it would mourn the dead, past numbering. Only one thing now left to do, walk away, leave Ireland behind you. The men in the distance are seeding the drifts in Beldar's fields and the Fingal. But even now is the past recalled by barren land and vacant walls. Only one thing now left to do, walk away, leave Ireland behind you. Only one thing now left to do, walk away, leave Ireland behind you.
Only a mile outside the parish of Lusk is where another of Fingal's favourite sons was born and bred. This son was born in a stable, and yes, it did make him a horse. His name will never be forgotten. It is Oracle. The Baker family of Malahoo bred this animal. He was a typical North Dublin man. He didn't know how to be beaten. For many years, the famous three, Oracle, Tom Draper and Pat Taff, brought pride into the hearts of Irish people everywhere. Such was the esteem with which this horse was held, that his skeleton is now preserved in the beautiful premises of the Irish National Stud at Tully, County Kildare. When on a visit to see the Arkle Memorial at Tully, it would be well worthwhile to take the time to visit the Japanese gardens, which are part of the National Stud. There are lots of interesting plants, many of which have been imported, as well as examples of bonsai in the gardens, which tell the story of man's journey through life. And it is a lovely resting place for one of our most famous sons.
Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land.
We just can't talk about Rush and Lusk without mentioning farming. Being so close to Dublin meant that we had to feed the city. The arrival of machinery made the job a bit easier. Steam power was all the rage early in the century. Huge steam engines frightened the lives out of every hen and goat and dog in the country. Every gate had to be widened to let them in or out. But people were slow to change from old methods. With more good sense than we realised at the time, farmers clung to the old, more leisurely way of working and living. Labour intensive, yes, but labour was cheap and there was plenty of time. The 1960s finally stamped out the old ways. Sophisticated machinery handles just about every job there is. Harvesting is a one-pass operation. Hay and straw can be saved in no time with no labour. Even our old friend the potato creates no hard work anymore. This has to be progress. But is the price too high? Where once hundreds of thousands of people had a living on the land to feed the country, now a tiny fraction of that number can produce that food. So we have had another great migration, this time from the countryside to the cities, and not just Cork and Dublin, but New York and London and San Francisco. And the few people producing all the food, now there's too much. I don't know if we're progressing or not.
Let's listen so our harvest time will never end. Let's listen. We all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land. Listen to the land. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above this land. Listen to the land. Just make me feel you're a tiny little seed. Tiny little seed that's reaching up.
The Irish cooperative movement was founded by Horace Plunkett in the last century, but it was not until the 1960s that the concept was applied to vegetable growing. A group of progressive farmers under the chairmanship of my father, William Rourke, turned a dream into a reality at Blake's Cross with the building of North Dublin Growers Co-op, or the Co-op as it was called. What could be better than the idea of farmers growing, packing, distributing and marketing their own produce? And it was a huge success. Sadly, the cooperative closed and the premises changed hands. The concept is still alive and going strong, as we can see from the number of producer groups operating successfully in the North County to this day.
The beef, the great beef trade in England, gradually evaporated towards the 30s. Why? Because we here in Ireland were paying land annuities to England. That was part of the treaty arrangements with the British in the 1920s, whatever went on, and the negotiations went on at that time. We paid land annuities, which was immoral and wrong. And De Valera decided, when he came to power in 1932, that one of the first acts he did was refuse to pay these annuities. Well, that was all very fine as things went, but the English government then said, oh, very well, thank you very much, but we'll settle that with you. And they put huge impositions of tax on our cattle going into English ports. And the result was that in order to recoup their £15 million, I think it was, per year we paid in land annuities, I'm not quite sure of that, but I think it was about £15 million. The price of cattle dropped from the average of going to England 30 to 40 pounds to £6 and £7. And worse than that, you had to have a license to export so many cattle. And farmers suffered a terrible loss, and there was a terrible decline in agriculture at the time because we hadn't developed as a corn producing country. We had only grown oats and maybe a bit of barley, very, very little wheat. And it changed then. There were no tractors then, by the way, none at all. And each of those farms that I spoke of would have at least 2 horses and some of them 3. And we also as kids knew what horses belonged to what farms, whether by their colour or by who was driving them or what.
Little on the farming end of it. The farming was, it went into it was in a bigger way. There was more farming done then than what's been done now. and men put in more time on the land than what they put in now. And it was all manual work, horses. There was no tractors then. It was all horse work. And I don't know how they cultivated as much land as what they did when you see all the big tractors they have now around the land. They had good crops then. They always had good crops. And if you went into a field of wheat or oats, all this could be seen of you was your head, your shoulders would be seen. It was that tall.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on this farm he had some chicks, E-I-E-I-O. With a chick here and a chick there. Here a chick, there a chick, everywhere a chick. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on this farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O. With a moo here and a moo there. Here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo, chick here and a chick there. Here a chick, there a chick, everywhere a chick. Old MacDonald.
Well, the straw at that time was all for thatching. All the people in Lusk, this man's father here, they come down, or if not, he'd send himself here down to see how was their straw for thatching. And the name of the straw was Irish velvet. And the wheat, the flour, there was only a small grain, but the flour was in it. But the thatch, the straw, I suppose, is about 6 foot, very close to 6 foot high. And if you bundles of the straw, it really thatch a house for anyone in them days. So now you can't get that.
Thatching is enjoying a bit of a resurgence at the moment. For years it looked as if it would join the number of old crafts disappearing into the past. I mean, where would you find a cooper today? Or a knife grinder? No, thatching looks like it's going to continue indefinitely. Good job too, because we wouldn't like Lusk to lose any more of its marvellous thatched cottages.
Say that I'll tell you about Lusk, what it was. It was an IRA hellhole, Calcutta. Yeah, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Well, Lusk was a great place for the IRA. A man used to drill them on the lock in Lusk called Tom Davis. He was in the British Army in the Boer War, and he used to drill them on the lock. And when the rebellion came in 1916, they all went to Ashbourne, and I remember it well because the fair was on the same day, and they went, the most of them on bikes, and we lost Tom Rafferty, and of course we lost Jack McCann in Rush, and we also had Dr. Hayes, which was another IRA man, and he was there.
I remember when they were released, and 1917, and the cars came from Dublin, and all the village walked up as far as Morgan's, Bright Tree, and met the cars there, and brought them down to the library. There was tea in the library. I remember I standing up on the side of the car, the place of the car, and speaking to the people on what they went out to fight for. But I remember them again, we were playing over there at the bank in front of John Angers. And we were lying down in the sun, and who come by on the ash? And he must have, Jerry Murtagh must have got to school running, but he shouted over, "Hello, Jerry," to Jerry Murtagh. And I remember that's the last I see them. He was arrested shortly after that.
And then in my teenage years, the Blackened Hands were here. And one thing I remember always was Jack McCann, Lord of mercy on him. And his wife was expecting, and he was staying about the place until the baby was born. And instead of that, the Blackened Hands came and shot him. And to this day, I can see his wife, and she's sitting in an armchair at the fire, and a shawl around her. And to me, she looked like Mary Magdalene. And that memory stayed with me.
Who's at the door? Who's not? Who's there? Yes, we're coming.
You are sleeping, Jack McCann,
Who is it?
a leader of the IRA command, a loaded pistol at your right hand, in 1920, in 1920. You are dreaming, Jack McCann, of Master Ash and his plans, a prison camp in England. In handcuffs there they sent me, in handcuffs there they sent me. You are sleeping, Jack McCann, dead to the roar of the Crossley band, the polished guns of the Black and Tans, with not a chamber empty, with not a chamber empty. You are screaming, Annie Cosgrave, begging for your husband to be saved, the children crying and afraid, of sorrow they'll have plenty, of sorrow they'll have plenty. You are dying, Jack McCann, bleeding from the guns of the murder band, released from your dream of Ireland. They do not lift you gently, they do not lift you gently. You are sleeping, Jack McCann, 33 years from child to man, in the old churchyard on marker stands. It says 1920. Says 1920.
Rush has always been a settling ground for people from faraway places. Lots of the local families in and around the town can trace their ancestry across the sea to the fjords of Scandinavia. Names such as Felinus and Sweetman, commonplace in Rush, but would be more at home in Scandinavia. In the 30s, Rush once again played host to the Continentals. This time it was to the families from the Low Countries, when the Ammerlinks, de Jongs and Rurocks arrived.
Well, as a child, I remember the Rurocks arriving in Rush, and they bought the field that is now the present day school at the top of the Martin's Field, we called it. And they set about planting it with bulbs. And the following spring, these beautiful bulbs, it was a carpet of colour. You know, tulips mostly and hyacinths. They're the bulbs I remember best. And there were articles written on in the paper about them. I can remember seeing pictures in the Independent of these beautiful bulb fields covered in colour, reds and yellows, and then the lovely blue hyacinths and pink and white. people came out from Dublin in their droves just to see these beautiful bulbs, and they were lined all along the side of the road. They were standing up in the ditch and they were taking pictures. Then one day, out of the blue, they chopped the heads off every one of them, to our dismay, and the people of the town were devastated. Shortly after that, they built a glass house, and they installed a large stove to actually heat the house. Now, people didn't realise it at that time, but that was the beginning. This method of growing plants and tomatoes was the beginning of the horticultural industry in Rush, Lusk and the surrounding areas.
To this day, the descendants of the De Jongs and Rurocks still continue their tradition of flower growing and horticulture in the Lusk area.
In 1936, John McCormack and Maureen O'Sullivan starred in a film named Song of My Heart. The leafy lanes of Lusk village were used for a setting. The neat white thatched cottages gave the place a timeless rural air. It is recorded that during John McCormack's stay in Lusk, he actually sang in the old church, which now houses the Lusk Heritage Centre, incorporating the Willie Monks Museum. In the making of this film, a number of local people were employed as extras. There are many stories still told by our now senior citizens of their meetings with the famous tenor. Ailey Hand still vividly remembers her encounter with John McCormack, which made a lasting impression.
That I could never sing again.
With the beginning of World War II, many men emigrated to work in England. Birmingham was the most popular place and has retained its Irishness to this day. The weekly registered letter containing John Bull's money lifted many a heart in Lusk and elsewhere. In the late 50s, the job situation worsened. Again, the flight of young people overseas in search of work, taking an aching void with them and leaving one behind. The misery of the mail boat, relieved only by Christmas or summer visits home. Lusk now has a population of 3,000 people. The worsening economic situation of the country from the mid-80s onwards has again produced the departure of many of our young people worldwide in search of work. At least they are now better qualified and educated to take their place anywhere in society. The mass exodus which occurred as a result of the famine in the 1840s and continues to this day has robbed us of many of the brightest and the best. There is hardly a place in the world today where descendants and emigrants from this country cannot be found.
If stones could speak, the past would open like a book of words and pictures, and we would know the truth. If grass could sing, the long dead would unlock our tears and shake our notions of those buried years. If walls could talk, the forgotten would be remembered.
Did you ever wonder what people did for entertainment in times past? Think about it. Videos only arrived yesterday. Television is really only here a wet week. Back further, before the Kennedys at Castle Ross, before the Walton programme, and there was only a radio in every 23rd house, how did people have any fun at all? Well, there was no shortage in Lusk. If there's a vacancy for anything, someone is sure to fill it. Early this century, people packed into tents to watch flickering black and white silent movies. Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin made their way into Lusk conversations. Like everywhere else, they became honorary citizens. Before cinemas were built in neighbouring Rush and Skerries, Lusk had regular movie shows. And even in the 60s, the old school was the venue. Packed houses every time, mind you. The other kind of shows were the travelling variety, the fit-ups and others. Very often a tent beside the handball alley was the venue for theatre, booking office, entertainment centre, for one night only, all the week. Murder in the Red Barn received several of its airings on the lot. It was great to see how a crowd of ordinary people could be turned into wonderful and fantastic characters when they were stuck on stage. David Llewellyn was a favourite entertainer every time the shows hit town. Actually, we'll never see the likes of them again. Plenty of homegrown fun as well. Lusk's Amateur Dramatic Society was second to none. Plays of every sort by the new time in the 40s and 50s. Nothing better than having a look at a neighbour who was, say, a farmer in the daytime, but king of comedy at night in the library across the green from the church.
We had a gramophone.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We
had a gramophone that time, and we'd have to play the records over and over and over again because we had to save up a couple of coppers a week to get a record.
That's right. There's one below in the top house with me.
Yeah.
And he was the first on radio.
We'd no amusement. No amusement whatsoever. Only we go to a concert maybe in the library. But I remember one time, they used to, like come around collecting jam pots and rags and things like that. Maybe looking for jam pots to get a couple of coppers to go to the concert. But this time, I remember a man come around, and Paddy went for the rags anyway. And Paddy go for my father's waistcoat, and gave his waistcoat.
Yeah.
I don't want to go look for the waistcoat.
The Max show and all used to be.
And it was only tuppence to get in. It was only tuppence to get in. We couldn't get the
library above, you know. And the dancing, the Irish dancing and all. It's all gone.
Oh yes, there was great concerts in the library. Great concerts in the library. I'll forget at the present time, like my memory is not the best, but there was really marvellous concerts.
Come on, pretty baby, let's move it
Cliff Richard, The Shadows, Buddy Holly, Ricky Valens, Elvis Presley, Chubby Checker and Perry Como. These were all stars. No prizes for guessing the decade. The rock and roll revolution didn't bypass Lusk. Although our one-station, part-time national radio was very conservative and reluctant to play pop music, Radio Luxembourg and the pirate ship Radio Caroline kept us all up to date with the latest and greatest on wax.
What would people say? What would people do? What would people think if people knew I was with you? Making love, making love, making love, making love. What would people think? What if people knew? Instead of being off to school all day, I was with you. Making love, making love. Making love, making love. I don't care what they think, I don't care what they do, don't care what they care about, all I ever care about is you. Making love, making love, making love, making love. Would people start to talk? Would people start to frown? If people knew the things we say, would it be over town? Making love, making love, making love, making love. What would the teacher do? What would the teacher say? What would the teacher do if the teacher knew he's out all day? Making love, making love, making love, making love. I don't care what they think, don't care what they do, I don't care what they care about, all I ever care about is you. Making love, making love, making love, making love, making love, making love, making love. Wake up, little Susie, wake up. Wake up, little Susie, wake up. We've both been sound asleep. Wake up, little Susie, and weep. The movie's over, it's 4 o'clock, and we're in trouble deep. Wake up, little Susie, wake up, little Susie.
Come on, let's twist again, like we did last summer. Yeah, let's twist again, like we did last year. Do you remember when things were really humming? Yeah, let's twist again, Christmas time is here. Round and round and up and down we go again. Oh, baby, make me know you love me so.
Each time we have a quarrel, it almost breaks my heart, 'cause I am so afraid that we will have to part. Each night I ask the stars up above, why must I be a teenager in love?
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've
The Black Raven Pipe Band is maybe Lusk's major institution and claim to fame. It has its roots in patriotism, dating from the beginning of the century. We followed its progress through Pick and Pain and Stories of Lusk 1. Over the last few years, the Black Ravens have built up a relationship with Texas, and obviously they are held in as great esteem over there as here. This year, 1992, the compliment was returned. The Texas Girls Choir took a trip to Ireland as part of their 30th anniversary celebrations. The Texas Girls Choir now is not just any old choir. They've performed in over 40 countries, major concert halls and on national and international TV shows. So it was a great compliment to Ireland and to Lusk and to the Black Raven Pipe Band in particular, when choir and band got together in Brackenstown Church Swords to do a joint programme. More power and continued popularity to them both. Lusk's Dramatic Society regroups every now and then, but her neighbours over the road in Rush have kept up the good work for more than a generation. It's not every town now that can boast of a new theatre of their own. Rush has one on the Millbank, and it suits us Lusk people well because it's within 3 miles of the tower. This Dramatic Society need make no apologies to anyone, as good as any and better than most.
When he came in here as shocked as hell, did he complain about the dextrose saline? Or when he was gasping for breath, did he use something to protest about the ammonophy? Or did you stack those of
That was an inevitable and emergency decision.
But so is this inevitable. Just because our patient is conscious does not absolve us from our complete responsibility. We must maximize now whatever powers he retains.
But how can a depressant drug improve his consciousness?
It will help him to use his consciousness care. Look, we must help him now to turn his mind to the real problem that he has. We must help him to an acceptance of his condition. Only then will his full consciousness be of any use to him at all. You say he refused to take the tablet?
Yes.
Hey. They brought up for a heavy brigade, I see. Doctor, I must insist that you do not stick that needle in me.
It's important that I do. Who for? For you.
But I'm the best judge of that.
I think not. You don't even know what's in the syringe.
I take it it's one of a series of measures to keep me alive.
You could say that.
But then it's not important. I've decided not to stay alive.
But you cannot decide that.
Well, why not?
You're depressed.
Does that surprise you?
Of course not. Your body received massive injuries. It takes time to come to an acceptance of the situation. Now, I shan't be a moment.
Doctor, don't stick that...
Like thatching houses, set dancing is making a major comeback, and it has made its way indoors from the crossroads, but then that was before cars, bikes as well, more likely. No, set dancing is really back, and fierce technical it is too. Irish ceilidh dancing never lost its popularity at all, and traditional music is still well able to stop us in our tracks and make us listen. Murray's is a mighty venue for music people, of course, winter and summer.
Founded in 1906, Lusk Round Tower Gaelic Football and Hurling Club has ever been an important organisation in the village. Its fine grounds and clubhouse facilities give the young people a chance of sport and recreation in ideal surroundings. The winning of the 1992 Dublin Junior Championship created much excitement and helps the continued healthy success of the club. The fervour of the Irish for sport was very evident in Lusk. Wrestling in Taylor's Field against teams from surrounding villages were very popular early on. Afterwards, football, hurling, camogie, handball, boxing, music, ceilidh dancing and ballroom dancing were all enjoyed. The Fingal rivalry in games was very intense, with many a punch thrown in the heat of the battle. The names of Dennis, Kellys, Monks, Grimes, Carton, Doyle, Jenkinson, Sherry, Finnegan, and others all too numerous to mention, figured in the conversational lore over many years. Pat Kelly's bicycle shop at the square, with its wall covered with photographs of sporting heroes, was a magic meeting place. Herein the tactics of achieving dreams were discussed for Sunday's match, and often on the following Monday night reasons for dashed dreams were given sober airing. The building of Kelly Park and Orland Park estates began an influx of new young people with various talents and occupations into the village stream. The consequent expansion of clubs and organisations augur well for the quality of life in the expanding village. Due to the Dublin County Council installing hard-court tennis courts, tennis has become very popular as a new sport in the area. The soccer club enjoys great support. Soccer is a sport which has increased in popularity following Ireland's participation in the recent World Cup. Also, the relaxation of the GAA ban on soccer has encouraged this expansion. The judo club, run by Jack Dennis, has been very successful, having many national title holders within its membership. The young people are increasingly drawn to athletics. Little did the late Jack Brown know what a fine group the athletic club would eventually develop to. Today you will find the young and old participating in this fine athletic club. We took the camera to one of their recent outings at Newbridge and were very impressed to find so many people, particularly teenagers, involved with so much enthusiasm. The strength of a community can be judged by the interest the people take in their sport. It's never too early to become a member of a team, and the number of successful groups reflects great credit on our people who give up their time in this pursuit of excellence.
And you'll forgive me if I'm utterly and totally partial towards Fingal, because there is nowhere else in the county I would like to be living, and there's nowhere else anybody from Fingal would like to be living. It's the best place in the world. But to everybody here tonight, the turnout is tremendous. I know there's a little bit of competition because there's a major debate on elsewhere, but should we pick that up somewhere else along the way?
Here's another proud moment for Lusk, Carduff in particular this time. We see Mrs. Carton at the Tidy Towns Awards, collecting her prize for a beautiful thatched cottage, which you saw first in Stories of Lusk 1. In fact, most of the village want to get in on the act. If you see a wee bit of pride on these faces, you're not mistaken. It's there, and rightly so. This is the third time Lusk has featured highly in the Tidy Towns and Villages Awards. Let me tell you though, these things don't just happen. Work, work and more work, organising everyone from babies to pensioners. And it is succeeding. If people are taking pride in their own place, the place is all the stronger for it. Maybe next year the big one will be ours.
Hello, we're here at Mary's of Lusk, and we're here with some of her French friends from the town of Torley-Fionn, which we are twinning with the end of April and the beginning of May. We're looking forward to them coming. They've been here for the past 3 days, and I hope they had a very nice time.
Nous remercions toutes les familles de l'accueil chaleureux que nous avons reçu. Le temps a été favorable avec nous. C'était 3 belles journées et nous espérons revenir bientôt parmi vous.
We'll have this translation now by John Jacques.
So Martin Gikel, the president, just said that we want to thank everybody here in Lusk. You have a great sense, a natural great sense of hospitality. And we were very lucky to have a very good weather during the 3 days. We are looking forward to see you again next April, the end of April and beginning of May.
Thank you very much. We have already all been very pleased to be there. We will be very pleased to welcome you when you come in next April. The landlord of Torigny-Fouillard hasn't been able to come this time, but I hope it will be able to come next time.
Thanks to the Dublin County Council, and in particular its Parks Department, under the direction of Michael Lynch. A number of well-known landmarks in North County Dublin have been preserved and restored. Malahide Castle, which was once the home of the Talbots, attracts many thousands of visitors each year. Ardgillan Castle, just north of Lusk, is another well-preserved and recently restored castle. The grounds on these estates are extensive and provide plenty of open space for an assortment of activities. Newbridge House and its model farm depicts a rural setting of days gone by. The Fry Model Railway Museum in the grounds of Malahide Castle has a very extensive layout, and it covers the history of the railway in this country. Its curator, John Dunn, is continually upgrading and expanding this magnificent display, and is generally available to both the enthusiast and amateur alike. These very fine buildings are all within a few minutes of the Tower of Lusk, and well worth a visit. Congratulations to the County Council and Dublin Tourism, and we look forward to the continued support.
So what's next? 1993. Keep looking onward, it's all you can do. The first steps have been taken in the twinning. Lusk is still moving forward. Next May in Lusk, you won't be able to order a pint in English. However, the twinning is the start of another story for another day. Maybe, perhaps, could it be Lusk 3? And here we are back in the square again, today. But nothing has changed, has it? Over here beside me is where our pagan forefathers had their rituals. Behind me was where our Christians had their monastery. If we listen hard enough, perhaps on a lonely evening, we might hear the voices from the past. We could hear the yell of a bloodthirsty Viking, maybe the echoes from the boots of a troop of redcoats. Listen harder still. Exhorting the people to stand up for their rights. History is all around us. Could we perhaps even hear the murmur of conversation from the boys outside the bar? Or maybe even the last sad goodbye of a young man or a young woman for the emigrant vote? Yes, indeed, history is here, but the sense of continuity is stronger. Lusk brings all its occasions to the square, happy ones and sad ones as well. May it still be here and alive when all our voices are dim and distant memories. The reason for this video is to continue the work of Stories of Lusk 1. There's so much material, so much history, so many memories here that one film can't do justice to them. Neither can two. No matter, we have made a film and we had so much enjoyment from making it. Thanks to the old team, and all the thanks in the world to the people who helped us, particularly our older citizens, who gave us the most precious thing they could give us, their memories. Lusk fits into a district. That's what we've tried to show you in this film. How it grew up, how it fits into that particular district, how it fits into Ireland, and how it fits into the world. And the whole thing is dedicated to you, the people of Lusk.
Gonna take a sentimental journey. Gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. got my bag, got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford, like a child in wild anticipation. I long to hear that all aboard. 7, that's the time we leave. At 7, I'll be waiting up for heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? I gotta take this sentimental journey, sentimental journey home. My heart could be so yearning. Why did I decide to roam? I gotta take this sentimental journey, sentimental journey home, sentimental journey.